I've been asked to talk on Islam in Africa, but for those of you who don't know me, the introduction says I'm a mental health worker. I also do some media work. I do some television work as well, do some radio work. So in terms of public speaking, I think I can handle myself to some extent, not being boasting. But the presentation in itself, it would cover a wide area as possible. I'd like to draw first of all on Islam going into Africa in the initial stages, but more so, I would like to deal with Islam in Africa in contemporary times. It's really what I want to look at. I very often prepare scripts, but never actually stick to the script because I like to speak from the heart. That's what I tend to do most of the time. So what I like to say first of all is, for those of us, or those of you who don't know Islamic history, in the Islamic inception, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, got the message first of all, the first set of Muslims in the initial period, through the persecution they were facing, they were actually sent to Africa to seek refuge. So Islam in itself been in Africa from then until today. So Islam went to Africa before it went to Pakistan, before it went to India, before it went to China, before it went to Europe. So in terms of a host nation, Africa has always been the forerunner to co-hosting Islam. So that's where we need to start at. In more recent times, Islam has reshaped Africa to some extent. If you want to reflect on the whole Malian Empire, how it reformed things, Mansa Musa, for those of us, or those of you who know your history, Islam did a lot of groundwork in terms of restructuring the infrastructure of Africa in the 12th century or so. That's before the colonialists came in and decided to, as we say, do the basa basa, or turn things around. That's a colonial expression, mind you, for those of you who don't know. But prior to the colonial period, Africa sustained a great level of stability via Islam. We talk about Mansa Musa and his wealth, and he's considered still today to have been the wealthiest person to have ever lived. And that's a testimony to the sort of wealth he had way back then. But of course, like everything else, the colonialists, I'm talking about the Europeans, etc., had their eyes on the prize in Africa because seeing people like Mansa Musa displaying structures of gold, thrones of gold, elements of gold, everything he did, you're talking about bling. He was the original bling man. You couldn't bling more than Mansa Musa because anywhere he went, he left trails and trails of gold. So Europeans in the quest to seek wealth and to develop Europe had a look at Mansa Musa and others at the same time, study the weaknesses, Europeans are good at that, and exploited that. So how they exploited that? Like they do today, is to pitch tribes, as it were called then, or nations against nations. So they would align themselves as they do today with certain groups, I wouldn't call any names, to overthrow other groups. And that's a method that was used then, very, very productive, and it's so productive that it undermined the Islamic development that was actually taking shape then. So where we are today, that's a full circle. Since the colonialists got involved in restructuring Africa, as I would like to call it, a lot of things happened. The legacy Islam once had or once embedded in Africa got eroded. And for those of you who know your history as well, we're talking about the Crusades who went into the Middle East, and again, the word basa basa caused a lot of trouble. So Islam was always on the back foot from then on and until today. Islam today in Africa is going through a testing time. And for those of us who hear the news, we heard about these so-called mad groups, the Boko Harams, etc., who are proclaiming to be defending Islam. But we know for a fact, like a sister sent me a poem last week, "You ain't no Muslim, bruv." That's what she said. You ain't a Muslim, bruv. So people who are advocating hatred in the disguise of Islam, we need to identify who they are. So people like the Boko Harams and so on really ain't doing Islam any justice at all. And Islam today, for what it's worth, is really struggling to make headway. In Africa, we have the BBC, we have Voice of America, we have these media agencies running riot, quite frankly, in Africa, spreading their message. And Muslims, for one reason or another, don't seem to have the infrastructure in terms of the mindset of how to counteract that. So when the BBC would invest millions of pounds into a media infrastructure, it's not for fun. When the Voice of America could invest millions of pounds in the media infrastructure in terms of television programs, in terms of radio programs, and executing that with precision and accuracy, Muslims are left wondering what's going on. So they've been showing images of unethical practices, different elements of culture from the West, and by all means, Muslims in Africa are seemingly embracing this culture. See a lot of sisters in particular in Africa these days no longer wearing the traditional garb, but you see them in the weave, which is a bit unfortunate. This is just something that's happening. So what needs to happen? Muslims in Africa needs to be pretty organized. How do you do that? It's easier said than done. And someone said to me recently, the other thing Muslims are suffering from, where in Christianity there is a pope, a central figure. In Islam, we lack leadership. That's central leadership. There is no caliph per se in terms of we can look for guidance. The Christians have the Pope, which most people take advice and guidance from. So in terms of our development and our practices, we really need to put our house in order. And because Africa, like I said before, was a forerunner to Islam, the first continent to really take Islam outside Medina. I mean, Islam even went to Africa before it went to Medina, from Mecca to Africa. So in terms of protecting the legacy, it's incumbent upon those who are living there and us generally to make sure that Africa stays that Islam stays in Africa. So collectivization is what I'm talking about, collective efforts. I mean, Africa today suffers from immense poverty, but there are also pockets of prosperity as well. And the media is very skilled in showing you the most deprived areas of Africa. Now, all of Africa is poverty-stricken. There's some very affluent areas in Africa, but you never see that on TV. Like I'm saying, when the BBC and Voice of America show you, or the media today, the Fox News and the Sky News, show you elements of Africa as a dying child. Oh my God, poor, poverty-stricken. So you tend to become empathic with that. You tend to want to give money. Where does this money go? So you have organizations like your Oxfam, et cetera, multi-million pound companies. Do this money really reach the masses? Those who are really, really struggling? There are Muslim charities working in Africa, we know that. And we need to support this. Because Islam in Africa today is going through a serious, serious transition. So instead of me sticking to my script of academicalizationism, I don't really deal with that. I want to see things as they are and as they are today. So like I'm saying, we need to contribute to the charities that working in Africa to make things better. I'm sure if you go on the internet, you see many charities going about and drilling wells in certain parts of Africa to bring water, and we need to support these projects. Politically, Africa is struggling extremely. The political leaders in Africa seem to have lost the zeal and enthusiasm and understanding of Islam. For the so-called French colonies in Africa, Mali, et cetera, very recently, when there was uprisings, these countries still tend to call on the colonial masters, past colonial masters, to help them. So they were calling the French troops. I mean, how could you be talking about Islam in a country like Somalia and these other countries, but when you're having difficulties, you're calling on the colonial masters? The same people who we condemn as non-Muslims and Kafir and Kufa, et cetera, when things are tight, we're running to them for help. Contradiction and exercise, isn't it? So we as a people, we as a group of people, need to be structurally organized, politically organized, economically organized. Economics plays a very important role in restructuring everything. Is there a central Islamic bank anywhere in the world where you can go tomorrow and pay in funds and say, well, it is going to a specific cause? No. Because Muslims are today fighting among themselves in and out of Africa. And that's happening for reasons one cannot go into at this point in time. So that in-house fighting, we need to curb that. There is too much work need to be done among ourselves in terms of repairing the undermining process done by the colonialists of Islam for us to be fighting among ourselves. The various fractions here and fractions there, we need to be dealing with Islam from an ideological perspective, from a succinct perspective, and working to understand where do we go, what's the next stage from here? 2015, 2016, 2017, what do we want to achieve collectively? There was talk of world government from an Islamic perspective. That's highly unlikely with the way I see it today. Until Muslims learn to understand and stop fighting among ourselves because of basic ideological beliefs, we ain't gonna make much progress. Solutions, it starts right here. It's among ourselves, it's among the youth. Where groups at the universities can work harmoniously together, we need to start right here. I showed out people from different parts of Africa and other parts of the world here, and the unification process starts in the colleges first and foremost, because people come here from all over the world. And if we can work together collectively as students, that is a start. That is a start. It's a beautiful environment for harmonious work. We need to explain that when there are projects like this taking place, it's for the brothers and sisters to support it. And I must commend Ismail. Ismail, I'm calling a name. I must commend you for putting on this project tonight. I think it's wonderful. Give the brother a round of applause, please. He's a hard-working brother, and he tries his best to do exactly what we're talking about. Bring Muslims together, whether you're Sunni or Shia, is not his problem. He is about bringing Muslims together. And that's something I respect about the brother. He is a sincere, hard-working brother. Coming back to the question. So the issue of working among ourselves actually starts right at universities, universally. So like I said, when there are projects like this taking place, we must support these initiatives. If we can make financial contributions to make sure these projects go ahead, we need to do that. So in terms of bringing solutions to our universal problems, because even though this script is about Africa, I have to make things relevant to today. I'm not an abstract person talking about historical statistics about how, I'm not about that. I'm a solutionist. I like to find solutions for our current problems. Yes, the colonialists have done what they had to do, but it's down to us today to repair the damages by working together. We hear about the ISIS system, wickedness and stupidness in the name of Islam. So we need to understand where we go from here. How as a youth, how as a collective people, we work together. Islam have a lot to, Africa have a lot to offer. Africa have a lot of resources, but the resources are owned by who? Foreign companies. You have your Pirellis and your Shells and whoever all companies owning the wealth in Africa. The so-called Muslim countries in Africa don't have a say in what happened economically. We are mesmerized and bombarded by the IMF and other international organizations lending them money which it can never repay. So riba is also hampering the development of Islam in Africa because most of the governments have been forced to accept loans from non-Muslim organizations for the survival. And once you deal in riba, you're in a lot of trouble. So poverty is really crippling Africa's development. So as a people, as a group of people, yes, we give where we need to give, but in terms of moving forward, we really have to try and work together collectively and do what we have to do. For all it's worth, the initiative to bring forward new projects and dynamic projects is something that I personally be doing from time to time. I work along brothers like Sheikh Zachary and others to make things happen collectively. And there's no point using this platform to be rhetorical and statistical about stuff. These platforms need to be used to bring solutions to our problems today. Like I said, I'm not going to come here and quote a set of data from 2012 or from 1902. I'm not about that. I'm a here and a now person. I like to deal with things as I see it today, and Africa is in crisis, socially, politically, and most definitely economically. And until there is some structure of a central bank of sorts, equivalent to the IMF, supporting Africa directly as a pivotal post for economical sustenance, Africa will continue to struggle. And I'm talking from North Africa right down to South Africa. Yes, there's a lot of money in the north of Africa, but the Arabs control a lot of wealth and stuff, but is that money cascaded down to the poor? We go to Hajj, and we see the amount of food, amount of animals being slaughtered every Hajj. How much of that meat is distributed to the poor and the needy in Africa, where it's really needed most? So a lot of waste take place. So the wealth is not equally distributed. We talk about paying zakat. If zakat is paid equally by Muslims, poverty will be eradicated from the world. So Islam, yes, have the solutions for problems today, but we have to embrace it. And for a lot of Muslims, Islam has become a sideshow. We are involved in our own personal acrobatics, as I call it. It's all about me and myself, and I am doing this and I'm doing that. But the collectivizationism, as I call it, is something that is seemingly absent. And these are the things we need to be working on as a group of young people moving forward. This is the generation of tomorrow. Collectivization is what it's about. We have to work together, because when the so-called, I use the term again, in this context, in non-Muslim governments, decide to infringe or encroach on Muslims, they're not going to differentiate whether you are Sunni or Shia. As long as you are Muslims, they're going to do what they have to do. So we as Muslims have to be very, very organized in terms of what we do, for what it's worth, politically, socially, and most definitely economically. I'll take a pause here for now, and I shall be around for the question and answer session. If there's anything I've said to offend anyone, my sincere apologies. Like I said, my script is prepared, but I like to speak from the heart. I think I get the message better that way. I like to deal with things as I see it. So until the question and answer session, I'm going to take a break here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.